Hey everyone, welcome to the DarshanTalks podcast. I am your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. As you know by now, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist at the Kulkarni law firm, and advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you have a think about drugs, you wonder about medical devices, and consider cannabis, or even obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. If you do all of those things, I really want to know more about why you're doing that. I do. I think I'm sort of crazy, but good for you. I have these discussions because they're a lot of fun and because I find myself learning something new each time I have them. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. It helps let me know that you're listening and keep these conversations going. If you want to reach out to me, you can always reach out to me on Darshan Talks on Twitter or go to our website at darshantalks.com. Our podcast today is really quite fun because we're going to be talking to someone who I think the closest version I have to what she does is Batman, and the reason I use Batman is if she's done it right, you never knew that she was there, which is the joy of being the SVP of Corporate Communications and PR at CMI Media Group and at Compass, which, let me tell you, are two separate companies and don't have an S at the end of Compass. Have an extra S at the end of Compass.
That's right.
So our guest for today, ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today is Carly Kuper. Carly, so good to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, and we had a brief or an initial conversation earlier where you talked about just your role. And the part that really got me interested in having this conversation was talking about PR. PR is one of those things that everyone talks about and it gets thrown around in jargon. And one of the things that stuck out at me is that if you do it right, no one knows that it was PR. It just organically seems to appear and everyone's magically amazing. But we can see some great examples of PR done wrong. And sometimes there are opinions. Some actors and actresses, and some might argue some royalty is doing it wrong right now. Others may say that is exactly what we were trying to achieve. So talk to me a little bit about what is PR and how is that different from corporate communications, which is your other piece of the job?
Sure. So I was actually thinking today about Charlotte's Web and how in that story, the spider Charlotte was creating these webs to talk about the pig and how amazing the pig was. And as a kid, I was always like, why isn't anyone talking about how amazing the spider is? The fact that the spider can spin these webs that say words. And I think it's probably a pretty good metaphor for PR. It's, you're right. It's behind the scenes and you're really brand building. And it's a really important part of brand building. And I'm totally okay with not being in the spotlight most of the time. Even now, prepping for this, I'm like really nervous and not totally comfortable. But because I get to talk about what I do and what I love, I was looking forward to it a lot. So yes, I think PR done right, you don't necessarily see it. You just, as a consumer or audience member, you just feel really good about that brand. PR done wrong, and wow, especially today, you get really blasted, and there are so many examples of it. And it's fun to, Monday morning quarterback and say how we would have done things differently. And the way that it differs from corporate communications is actually, there's a lot of similarities and there's differences. So, PR is mainly external and it's mainly, shaping the way that your consumers, your audience members, your customers are going to see your brand. And then corporate communications internally, there is some shaping there, where you're trying to share positive messages. But corporate communications is mainly transparency and trying to make sure that your staff is aware of what they need to know to do their job or to foster positive corporate culture, things like that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that corporate communications is internal while PR is external, but you're using often the same techniques. But with PR, if you do it right, I don't even know you did it. So I don't know that strategic post that was placed in that newspaper was what was paid for. I just assumed there was an interest story, and I read something and I start developing a positive image about that organization. Is that a lot harder to do when you're doing corporate communications? Because everyone knows if Carly's messaging, it's corporate communications and there's a purpose. Or is it more mechanical and organization driven, if you will? So it's feel free to sort of jump in.
And I don't know if this is what you meant, but it's definitely, I hope to think that people don't look at my communication and say, oh, it must be spin because Carly is sending it out. The good thing about our organization is that it's a very friendly, organization where everyone kind of knows each other, even though we've grown pretty large. And so I like to think that people know that I'm honest and transparent. And if the news is bad, I'm going to share it just as much as if the news is good. It's really just amplification. It's making sure that people are aware of what's going on. But yes, I think sometimes, if I'm worried that it might seem like I'm just trying to put a positive spin on something, I'll work extra hard to make sure that it comes across in the right way. And with, external PR, it's definitely true that when it's done right, you don't necessarily know that it's done, but there's so much to it. If we're going to go with the Batman metaphor, which I love and I'm totally going to use a lot, it's that utility belt. I mean, there's so many incredible tactics that we have now. Excuse the train noise if you can hear that. There's so many incredible tactics that we can use for PR that truly have not even existed in the early days of my career. I don't really want to mention fax machines that I started out with, but, using social media is definitely better than fax machines. And you definitely, as a PR professional or any type of communications professional, need to be up on using social media, how to use that to leverage your best communication. It's thought leadership. I think as a PR person, I have always understood that you have to use your brain a lot. You have to know as much about whether you're in-house like I am now or whether you're working with clients. When I started my career at Weber Shandwick, I had many clients that were in the tech industry, and Verizon Wireless was one of them. And I had to know everything there was to know about cell phones, down to how they worked. I would get a shipment in of the latest cell phones, and I would take it home for the weekend and learn to use it until I could pretty much write the manual, because reporters might be asking details about it. So it's always, there's a lot to it where, and that's one thing I love about it. I get to use my brain. I need to have, a mix of strategic thinking and sometimes in the weeds that's fun because it lets you be really passionate about it. And so with CMI Media Group and Compass, which is a great organization with a great story, it makes it a lot of fun. Like every day is fun because I get to really, be passionate about it, and I get to share, I'm really amplifying good news pretty much all the time, which is nice.
That sounds like a super fun job, amplifying good news all the time. It reminds me of Apple. Whenever they did their keynote speeches, they'd always end with, Steve Jobs would always end with, and just one more thing, and then just make an even bigger announcement. Speaking of Apple, though, I do think it's kind of interesting. You talked about how with Verizon, you spent a lot of time and energy sort of building the PR group and sort of amplifying the message, if you will. The part that sort of is more interesting to me is I read that Apple, at least during the time of Steve Jobs, didn't actually spend that much money on sales and branding, and they spend more of their energy on PR because they actually knew that once the cool people have their products, everyone else will buy them anyways.
Right. Early influencer marketing.
Yeah. So how do those lessons actually translate for you when you're helping? Let me ask you this question. Do you actually, first of all, only do PR for CMI in the sense that do you do it for the company or do you do it for its clients as well?
Well, occasionally clients will come to us for counsel and I'll be pulled in for PR related things. But mainly I'm the in-house PR person. And, it's interesting being the in-house PR person at a marketing agency, because I can tell you, it may not sound, unbiased, but I can tell you that there is a time for PR and there's a time for marketing. And you really can't have one without the other. And there's a time for sales. I think it's amazing that a company like Apple can have a strategy where they're putting all of their money into PR. I'm a PR person. I'm going to say, yes, do that, and pay me more, I'll take it. But I think that that only works sometimes. It's really important to have that, multi-channel. My colleague, Susan Dorfman, will call it the omni-channel, or she has another word for it that's escaping me right now. But it's really, it's something we talk about all the time, because you need to have advertising, marketing, with social media, organic and paid. All of those things are incredibly important, and we use all of those things. I have a partner at CMI Media Group at Compass who oversees the marketing side, and we have a team, and we work collaboratively on absolutely everything and could never do any of it without the other.
Which I 100% agree. So let me ask you this question. Usually if I'm starting a startup life sciences company, right? And I'm kind of going, I'm going to have this blockbuster product. And who do I need as I'm getting closer to bringing the product to market? The first thing that comes to mind is I need to bring in someone from marketing and sales, because I'm going to have to sell this.
Right.
Often too late, you'll realize that you probably need to have PR as well. What is the right moment for you to, as a startup, to start thinking about having PR?
Yeah, I think everything at once, if you can, and search too. Is really important to have from the very beginning, because when you leave any of those factors out, you then have to backtrack, which is going to cost you more and be more difficult, right? So you need all of those things to be part of the launch, part of the website. You need the people who create the website. You need the search professionals who optimize it. You need, PR to handle the announcements, but you also need marketing for awareness. All of those things are incredibly important.
So just out of curiosity, do you guys call yourselves the Four Horsemen?
We used to, but now we're going with the Batman thing. That was very good.
Thank you. Okay, so these lessons, which are for PR, you talked about marketing, sales, search, they often work on a more external audience. As you're translating that internally, obviously you don't have search. And there is certain level of marketing and PR that needs to work together to bring people awareness of the many amazing things that CMI Media Group and Compass are doing. But when you're doing that, how do you decide what channels you're going to use? What are the factors that decide that? Is it the size of the news, if you will, or is it is this a regulatory thing and we just need to tell you guys, so here you go? Like how does that process work, first of all?
Right. So I can speak specifically to how we do it at our company, which is not a heavily regulated company, although we work in that space. But one really huge learning over the past few years has been that our internal audience is also our external audience. Oh. So, for example, our Instagram, a big percentage of our followers on Instagram are our employees. Because our employees love Instagram. I love Instagram. I follow, everybody that I'm interested in on Instagram, and our employees are the same. So we have realized that that's a way to reach employees. So we do an analysis of all of the channels available to us. We know who's following us or who we could reach on those channels. And we use them with, it's like the media rules of, reach and frequency. We use them in line with what that message is and what we're trying to achieve. So we always start with what is our goal, and who is our audience, and so therefore who we can reach. So I actually segment audiences within our organization. So sometimes something is for all staff, but sometimes we're really trying to reach a particular audience. We really prioritize our people. It's very, very important to us that they know what's going on, know what's available to them. So for example, a big thing that we often communicate is benefits. And we have this really incredible HR department, we call it our people teams department, who try to introduce new benefits often in line with what our people need. So with the pandemic, I know you didn't want to talk pandemic too much, but it's been a very tough time for people for many different reasons. And so we had the HR team creating new benefits and also needing to make sure people were aware of existing benefits, but we also had to segment it. A working parent is going to need different things than a 20-something single person with no kids. And those two individuals are just as important. It's just as important that they are aware of what's available to them, that they're educated, that they're happy, that they're feeling heard. So there were many, many, many things. I work daily with my PR counterparts to make sure that that is, front and center. So sometimes we did announce something on Instagram first that was meant for employees, and it's okay if other people see it. But we just wanted to make sure that we got those eyeballs. Email alone does not work anymore for everything. It works for a lot of things, and we still use it often. But we do have to be strategic, and we measure like crazy. We want to know what's working and what's not.
Which is really kind of interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like in many ways, in your function, you would have a really good pulse of the organization, because you're, like you said, you're constantly measuring. I guess my question is, as you start looking at new benefits and you're going, we're going to introduce these benefits, and I'm making this up and I have no idea if you guys have this, but I'm afraid to say something and you go, that's a good idea. Yeah. But let's say that it's childcare for argument's sake, right? Because COVID added new pressures on on parents, and childcare becomes an issue. Do you tend to have HR come to you, or as you call the people's team comes to you and goes, from your information, is this a benefit that will be well received, or is that putting the cart before the horse?
No, I think so. I want to also say our people team also measure, and they're amazing at it. Like if they ever, got tired of being on people teams, they could join our data analytics team, no problem. But yes, we talk about it all the time. We do focus groups of our staff. We survey our staff very often, and we have an open line of communication all the time. We have both, we invite them to connect, but we also have an anonymous survey that you can take anytime. And so, actually the childcare thing has come up many times. We did determine that people want to choose their own childcare versus having it on site. That was the preference of the majority of staff across our 8 offices. And so instead, we offer discounts on childcare. So the HR staff is going out and calling childcare providers and negotiating discounts. And it really, it takes that understanding. If they didn't measure or they didn't ask, they may have, created daycare on site and no one would use it or something. So it's definitely, we see the benefits of keeping that pulse, especially now because we've grown. And I've been working here for 10 years. And when I started, I think we were 150 people, and now we're something like 750 people. So I really do try hard to get to know each and every person, but that's just not possible anymore, unfortunately. So it's more important than ever to use what we know about data and other ways to collect to make sure that we're accurate when we're taking that pulse.
So this is going to sound bad, but very early on in that last response, one of the things you talked about was surveys. And as an employee who's taken surveys before, they're the bane of what you receive all the time. So I'm just curious, how do you do surveys right? How do you do surveys in a way that they're well received? Because it sounds like you actually do get responses and there's valuable feedback. In my experience, I'll tell you that the way surveys were sent to us, here's a survey, it's literally like 50 pages long, and we hope to do something with it. Nothing. You spend all that time doing it. At the end of 6 months, they're like, yeah, we sent you a survey last time. Here's another one. And you're like, what did you do with the last one? Like 6 months ago. Spent so long on that thing. Yeah. So how do you do it right?
So you may not like my answer because we have a research department. So we're able to tap professionals who know how to make sure that surveys are going to be accurate. So that is amazing. And not everyone can do that. But then also, the department's heads are in constant contact. So if there's going to be a survey going out of employees, but then, about IT tools, but they also want to put out a survey related to diversity and inclusion, we would make sure to stagger those so that we're not putting people in overwhelm. Or, maybe we will take a fresh look and say, could we achieve this with a focus group or by, sending an email and measuring clicks or something instead of doing a survey? So we're pretty cognizant of that. And we definitely try to keep them really short. I think they tend to be more like, if we're doing them and we try to keep it like kind of one topic, 5 question surveys. Sometimes we do have the longer ones, but then we just try to give people a lot of time, try to explain the importance. We'll take the survey ourselves and time it so that we can say, okay, this was, it looks long, but it only takes 15 minutes, that sort of thing. So I think all of those things help.
Okay. So you talk about sort of building a culture, measuring, constantly improving based on the feedback you're getting, which is all awesome. But then you haven't said this, you and I had a conversation about this yesterday, actually, when we talked about it. We talked about corporate communication disasters.
Yeah.
And we talked about organizations that in many senses were totally well-meaning. I'm not picking, I think this was Basecamp who did it a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, where they said, we don't want politics in our, at our workplace. We want this to be a place you come to work, and that's what we pay you for. And we welcome that. That did not go well. They had a lot of people, they had a lot of people leave. My question to you is, playing Monday morning quarterback, because that's the easy part, right?
Right.
How would we have done it differently? If you were going to do something similar at CMI, and we're not saying you are, how would you do it differently?
So, in that case example, I wanted to start by saying this is going to be an old statement, but that's what happens when you don't have diversity in an organization. When you have representation, then you have someone and it's elevated. So it's when you have diversity at all levels of your organization, then you have people saying, hold up, what you just proposed is a bad idea. It's offensive. It's triggering. So, you can, I think it's fair to say, look at that example and say, clearly the people who were making the decisions, clearly the people who had the power there did not have people who were saying to them, hold up, this is a bad idea. So I would say that if there's an argument for inclusion anywhere, that's a good one. And that they really didn't read the room very well. The lines are completely blurred right now between personal and work life. They are. I mean, here I am in my home talking to you and you're in your home, right? It's like it, but it's not just the pandemic. I mean, like it's happened for a long time that those lines are blurred. This is America. There's free speech. Like people want to be able, it's part of who we are to be able to share, discuss about the things that are important to you. If I'm being generous, I think that what they were trying to do was say, please stop being distracted, and there's a time and a place. But then you shift that conversation to a safe space to allow it to happen. You support development of ERGs and other initiatives, because the conversations that they didn't want happening was around politics and diversity. So you shift it to a safe space. Should politics discussion happen in the office? I don't know. They always say don't discuss politics, but saying, you cannot discuss this at work is just, you're waiting for a disaster.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the first step is don't read the room, have the room talk to you first. Because apparently they did a terrible job at reading the room. But that's kind of interesting to me, right? It sounds like, as a concept, it sounds like a great idea that come for work. But like you said, just reading the room becomes more difficult. So now, if you're entering this world, actually, I'm noticing that we're getting a little farther on time than I thought we were, because you're just fascinating to talk to. Before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about what you just raised, which was corporate culture. And especially, and I know I said that I'm not a huge fan of talking about COVID and the pandemic, but during COVID and the pandemic,
yes.
One of the big things, and I had Susan on earlier, and she talked about the importance and value of corporate culture, and you reiterated the importance of that, because we saw in the Basecamp version, corporate culture was very well established, but apparently senior leadership didn't see the same corporate culture that existed. How do you go about defining corporate culture, redefining it in the age of a pandemic, and then de-defining it once we come out of it? So what does that look like, and how do you sort of structure that?
Well, so, corporate culture is incredibly, incredibly important to us. We really prioritize it, invest in it. We did start by listening. So when we were really small, we didn't have to do a lot to foster culture because it was incredibly organic. And across our different offices, the culture is different. It feels different. If you spend any amount of time in those offices, you see that, in our, South Jersey office, there's always a plate of cookies for people to take that, people are baking, versus like in our Philadelphia office, people are always, running out to lunch at the hot new restaurants, and it feels a little more urban. So, definitely we started with making sure that we had an understanding of what the culture was like in each of those offices. And many years ago, we developed our core values, and the core values touched on really who we are and making sure that we maintain that. It had a lot of reflection on our culture. And then we invest in it. We have fund committees that are employee run, that create events. And so when the pandemic hit, those fund committees continue to be funded by the company and continue to be supported. And we really encourage them to try to find things that they could do to, have virtual events and things like that, and adapt. Wasn't perfect. It was really hard. All of this has been really hard for everyone. But I think that they did a really, really, really good job in keeping people connected. We had something like 200 new employees hired during the pandemic. So that's, quite a number of employees who've never even stepped foot into any of our offices. And so we wanted them to know who we were. Also, during the pandemic, we did kick off some new ERGs. And so that was a big deal because that is completely employee run and corporate supported, and is very much about what our culture is. So it's kind of like a setup of, we're going to support, we're going to guide from that corporate perspective, we're going to fund it, but we're really going to ask the employees to lead it so that it's real, so that it's genuine, and it's in line with what people want and need.
So you talk about that, but let's talk about those 200 new employees you hired in the last year or so. What sort of strikes me is they literally haven't left their house.
Right.
They haven't left their house, but they're now part of an organization that's 700 people strong, and those people are now, hopefully, in many ways, part of that culture. How do you you talked about core values, but how do you onboard someone into a culture and into a feel that makes them feel like this is their new home? You talked about the virtual events and the like, but I don't quite think, I think that adds to it, but there's a central sort of common goal. And that's got to be one of the hardest part of being in corporate communications and defining corporate culture. So I'd love to get some.
Well, I'd love to take credit for it, but it really was mainly our people team that came up with a lot of the ideas. So, but we're constantly brainstorming, and my team and people teams and a greater group of people across departments. We have a weekly meeting where we talk about our staff and how to just make sure that, things are great for them, good or great for them. And our people team have instituted, along with our leadership team, a number of things. Mental health days. We're having one tomorrow. The whole office is closed. That was not on our original calendar. Really looking forward to, some time with my daughters. And we had a day where everyone got a gift card to DoorDash, like dinner's on us, everyone. It's a mix of like the little things, and the big things of, it's not just about fun, although that's of course a big part of it. It's about continuing learning. Investing in development and training is a big part of who we are. We made sure that was continued. It's about continuing to measure, as I said, and make sure that we're doing okay, and connecting with people and making sure that they have the support that they need. It's also about like giving our managers the tools that they need to have difficult conversations, raise the flag if an employee seems like they need help, those kinds of things. And it was like even the impromptu things, like Susan sent my daughters books as a gift because that's like who she is. But it like meant the world to me, like that my coworkers would do things like that. And I have my coworkers all the time texting, just checking in. And I think that's kind of part of the core values. And we've also been able to continue a lot of our philanthropy, which is a big part of our corporate communications. We just announced to staff, and I guess I'm announcing it externally now, that we, during the pandemic, were able to fundraise and also do a corporate donation to fund the building of a library at a school called LaGuardia Academy in Philadelphia that we have partnered with for many years. And
Wow.
So we were able to fund everything from the books to the furniture to new laptops for the students. It was incredibly satisfying to be able to do that. And that was something that came from every single employee was involved in that. Some people donated one book, some people donated a shelf full of books. Like, it was incredible. And sometimes, like, I always feel that, like, when I'm, when things are not going right for me, like stuck in the house all the time, that sort of thing, doing something good for others feels really good. And we got this really wonderful thank you from the students and the dean at the school, showing us the library, over video, and the kids are back. They're back with masks on and they're using the library. And that literally did not exist before. So it felt good. So I think it's like, it has to be a lot of things. It can't just be one and done, check the box. You have to be constantly working at it. But it is really, really worth it.
I definitely need to have you back on to talk a little bit more about the role of charity in giving and corporate communications. The funny part is, though, when you talked about giving to a school and stuff, this has nothing to do with CMI. This has to do with the fact that I'm an Office aficionado. So I don't know if you ever watched The Office, but
yes. Are you leading me into this? Do you know what we did for our staff?
No, I have no idea what you did.
Okay, you tell your thing and I'll tell you what we did.
No, I was referring to Scott's Talks, the episode.
Yeah, we don't. I would say
the positive version of that.
Yeah, our CEO Stan Woodland is the opposite of Scott's Tots. He doesn't talk about it, but he really supports these kids in many ways, and it's wonderful. No, we're what I was going to tell you. No, we really, I promise you, we donate money to the school.
Oh, no, I totally believe you. I just thought it was one of those situations where he made all these promises. You guys actually delivered. You had them on video and thanking you and stuff like that. So that's great.
Yeah.
I just meant it's the opposite of what you should do. But yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, we do love The Office. And I love that we love The Office because it was on a long time ago, but, even my, middle school age daughter and my kindergarten age daughter love that show, and it's back. It's got such a resurgence. So our fun committee on Halloween held an Office themed Zoom, and people dressed up as the characters, and there's a trivia. I happen to have, through a friend, a contact to Kate Flannery, who played Meredith on The Office, and I spoke with her. I spoke with Kate, and she agreed to come and surprise everyone. And so she came onto the Zoom. It was 2 minutes after the Zoom started, and then she shows up, but she doesn't say anything, for a second, and then someone says a word that is not a safe for podcast word, and that's when I really, okay, people see her now, and it was incredible. She is truly, I've gotten to meet her a few times because of this shared connection that we have, and she's always, wonderful and kind and everything, and true to her real spirit in real life. She's nothing like the character. She stayed on for a while. She did trivia. She played a song on the piano because she's incredibly talented pianist and singer. And it was a blast. And after she left the Zoom, everyone was like, whoa. And I think one of my coworkers said that she'd invited a brand new employee. It was her first day to come onto the Zoom. And the employee was saying to her, is this every day? Does this? But no, that was literally the only celebrity that I know. So that's done. I've got nothing else up my sleeve, but it was a lot of fun. And, I and truly the rest of the leadership team, we will do anything that we can to make our people smile. We will. And that is
so cool.
That was extreme, but it was really fun. And it was like a highlight for me.
That is such a high five moment right there. High five to you. I am well beyond what I thought our podcast would take, but you were super, super fun. So I have a couple of questions for you, though, before I let you go, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
First question. Based on our discussion, what is one question you'd like the audience to answer for us in the comments?
Oh, great question. So I think, how about let's keep it positive? How about what do you wish that your company offered employees? And then maybe that could give us some ideas for new things we could offer to our people.
I like it. So what is one thing you'd like the company to offer to your employees? I try to make an effort to answer those questions. For me, I think one of those things would be more face time with leadership. I think is always a good thing because it tells you that you can at least inform people about the things that make a difference to you, which you may not have the same opportunities. It sounds like in your case, you actually do have those opportunities more often because you guys, use surveys, not the 50-page kind, but you
right.
do use surveys. So there are some opportunities there, and you do actually land up meeting people as well. But that informer job, that would have been a nice thing to have. So that would be mine.
That's a good one.
I do have two questions for you that are rapid fire.
Okay.
What challenged you this month?
And it has to be work related because I'll tell you.
It does not have to be work related. Anything.
I think I'll answer work related. I think a big challenge for me is as our office reopens, different people feel different levels of comfort with coming into the office, and just making sure that we're doing right by everyone. It's a huge challenge. We're taking it on, and I'm happy to do it. But I wish I could just wave a magic wand and make it, make COVID go away, make it all okay. So I'd say that's a big one, and it continues.
Fair enough. And last question is, what was the best part of your job this week?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so I would say that the best part of my job this week is that, so I write a daily newsletter for our clients. It's a briefing that tells them what news happened that relates to them, that they should be aware of over the last 24 hours. And I do it every day. And as part of that, we do a lot of thought leadership and we just finished a big round of media, like upfronts, new fronts. We had a lot of analysis that I was then able to share in the newsletter. And we got really positive feedback from clients on that. So it's incredibly satisfying to get to write it and to get to share, to again, use my brain and to get to share these insights with clients. And so I would say that was a big part of my week and probably the best part of my week all the time because I love writing it.
Oh, good for you. Okay. So let me do a quick summary. During this conversation, we talked a little bit about brand building, and we talked about how to avoid how people associate PR with spin, but it's often just amplification as opposed to total and obvious spin. We talked a little bit about corporate communications and PR. In both cases, the goal is transparency. What I thought was really interesting is, as part of that, you talked about knowing people, knowing their biases, and sort of bringing out and informing them about the things that matter to them. And an example you gave was the single person versus the married with children person and how they might have very different goals. And we talked a little bit about tools you use to do that. You talked about segmentation. You talked about surveys. You talked about social media. You talked about the four horsemen, if you will: marketing, sales, search, and PR. We then got into corporate culture. You talked about core values. You talked about using virtual events, onboarding new employees, and new corporate culture, and the new ERGs. We then talked about how you work closely with your benefits team, well, specifically your people's team, and how you support each other. You talked about some of the cool things you guys are doing, like the mental health day you have tomorrow. So I'm very jealous about that. And the charities you guys support, including the anti-Scott's Tots, if you will,
Right.
based in Philly. And as someone who lives in Philly, thank you. And you talked about the amazing thing you did with the office Halloween party, which I thought was definitely something that you can put on your resume for the rest of your life.
It'll be the only thing on my resume. It was great.
Got married is on there.
Right.
Flaherty, but I forget what her first name was actually.
Kate Flannery.
Kate Flannery.
Yeah.
But I think that covers it. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. That was a lot. We talked about a lot. Yeah.
This was so wonderful to have you on. Carly, how can people reach you if they have questions?
So Darshan, thank you. This was really fun. People can email me at Kuper, Kuper at CMIcompass, and that's with one S.com. But I'm also, my team and I are also behind our social feeds. So feel free to follow us on any of our socials and message us there.
That's awesome. And if you like this podcast, please leave a comment. Please subscribe. You can find me on DarshanTalks on Twitter, or just go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. Carly, this was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.